Beauty and the Beast. In a quiet village tucked between rolling hills, Belle felt like a puzzle piece that did not quite fit. While the morning market buzzed with talk of chores and bread, she dreamt of distant lands hidden within the pages of her stories. To the neighbors, she was a mystery, but to herself, she was simply waiting for something real to begin. Across the square, Gaston watched Belle with a hunter's focus. He didn't care for her books or her dreams. He only saw a prize to be won. To Gaston, life was a ladder, and he was already at the top. He believed that with enough charm and strength, anything he desired would eventually be his for the taking. The peace of the village was broken when Belle's father, Maurice, set off through the dark woods. He carried a new invention, hoping to change their lives forever. But the forest was alive with shadows and cold mist that turned his path into a labyrinth. As the wind howled, a massive, crumbling castle appeared through the trees like a silent stone giant. Driven by love and a refusal to give up, Belle tracked her father to the heart of the forbidden castle. She found him locked away in a cold, shadow-filled cell. Without a second thought, she made a choice that would change her life forever. She offered her own freedom to the darkness in exchange for her father's life and safety. In a secluded tower, the beast watched his only hope slowly wither away. The enchanted rose was a ticking clock, its falling petals marking the time he had left to find redemption. He felt like a monster, trapped in a cage of his own making, convinced that no one could ever look past his exterior to see the man inside. Deep within the castle walls, the silent objects began to stir with a newfound hope. Lumiere, the charismatic candelabra, believed that Belle's arrival was the miracle they had been waiting for. He knew that the castle needed light and laughter again, and he was determined to make their guest feel like she was exactly where she belonged. The beast led Belle to a room she never expected to find. Behind heavy oak doors lay a library that stretched toward the clouds, filled with thousands of stories waiting to be rediscovered. As Belle climbed the high ladders, she felt the cold gloom of the castle begin to lift, replaced by the warm smell of old parchment and the promise of friendship. Winter arrived, covering the castle in a blanket of white. In the quiet courtyard, a transformation began that had nothing to do with magic. The beast tried to be gentle, feeding small birds that landed on his massive paws. Belle watched him, realizing that the frightening exterior was just a mask for a soul that had forgotten how to be kind. As the bond between the girl and the beast grew, the enchanted staff worked tirelessly behind the scenes. Mrs. Potts brewed the perfect tea, while Cogsworth kept everyone on a strict schedule. They knew that time was running out, but for the first time in years, the sound of laughter echoed through the halls, giving them a reason to believe. The evening air was filled with a melody that seemed to pull the very stars closer to the castle. As they moved across the floor, the world outside ceased to exist. In that dance, they weren't a prisoner and a monster, but two souls finding a rhythm they had both thought was lost forever. For a moment, the curse felt distant and small. Happiness was fleeting when Belle saw her father in trouble through the magic mirror. the beast looked at the last petal of the rose and then at the girl he had come to love. He realized that true love wasn't about keeping someone close, but about letting them go, even if it meant remaining a monster for the rest of his life. Back in the village, Gaston fueled a different kind of fire. He used fear and lies to turn the townspeople into a mob, convincing them that the beast was a threat to their homes. His jealousy had turned into a dark obsession, and he led the crowd toward the castle, determined to destroy the only thing Belle had grown to care about. Back in the safety of her home, Belle's heart remained behind at the castle. She nursed her father back to health, but her mind was filled with the image of the beast's lonely eyes. She realized that home was no longer just a place with four walls, but wherever the people she truly cared about happened to be. The silence of the castle was shattered by the roar of the angry mob. Gaston led the charge, his heart hardened by a refusal to lose. As the villagers broke through the gates, the enchanted objects prepared to defend their home. They weren't just fighting for a building, they were fighting for the family they had become. High above the chaos, the beast sat in silence. He had no will to fight, believing that without Belle, his life had already reached its end. He listened to the sounds of the battle below, feeling more like a ghost than a king. To him, the curse was no longer about his appearance, but about the emptiness in his heart. The confrontation high above the castle was a clash of two different worlds. Gaston swung his weapon with a heart full of hate, while the beast simply looked on, refusing to strike back. He was tired of the cycle of anger and pain. He chose to accept his fate, even as the storm raged and the world felt like it was falling apart around him. Everything changed when a familiar voice echoed through the thunder. Belle had returned, her arrival cutting through the beast's despair like a ray of light. Seeing her gave him a reason to live and the strength to protect what he loved. The battle was no longer about survival. It was about the hope of a future he had finally started to believe in. As the final petal drifted toward the ground, a heavy silence fell over the castle. Belle, the words that had been locked away for so long, letting her heart speak finally and truly. The curse had done its worst, but it could not stop the warmth of a genuine connection. In that moment of loss, the magic of the heart took over. As the light enveloped the balcony, the heavy burden of the curse began to dissolve. The sharp edges of the beast's form softened, turning back into the man he was always meant to be. It wasn't just a physical change. It was the rebirth of a soul that had finally learned the true meaning of sacrifice and kindness. The castle was no longer a place of shadows and silence. With the curse broken, life returned to every hallway and every heart. Lumiere, Cogsworth, and Mrs. Potts stood together, human once again, watching the couple dance. They had all learned that beauty isn't something you see with your eyes, but something you feel with your heart. The story that began in a small village ended with a new beginning. Belle found the adventure she had always read about, but she found something even better, a family, and the place where she truly belonged. The village girl and the prince lived on, proving that even the most stubborn hearts can be changed by a little bit of love.